This story was shared with me numerous times by an old family friend, Sharon, during my childhood. It serves as a piece of life advice that I've always kept in mind, especially whenever hitchhiking comes up. To her credit, I've never forgotten it, and it still makes me uneasy whenever I think about it. Sharon grew up around the same time as my dad, in the early 1980s. At that time, she was a kind-hearted young woman in her mid-20s, always willing to help others in need. I can easily imagine her being that way when she was younger. One day, while driving into the city, about a 2-hour journey from her town, she saw a man walking along the roadside. As she approached, he raised his arm and thumb in the typical hitchhiker manner. Sharon, bless her heart, pulled over and asked if he needed help. She described him as polite, albeit a bit shy, when he requested a ride into the city. With a smile, she opened the passenger door for him. He tossed his bag into the back seat and buckled up for the ride. They engaged in pleasant small talk during most of the trip, discussing friends, the news, and other light topics. Sharon felt they were getting along well and even offered to buy him dinner at a pit stop about halfway to their destination. Although he seemed flustered and awkward when she paid, they continued their journey. Once they arrived in the city, the man thanked her profusely for the ride and the meal. He asked to be dropped off in downtown and requested Sharon's phone number so he could contact her in the future and perhaps catch up. Happy about the prospect of staying in touch, Sharon wrote down her number and drove off, feeling good about her good deed. Now, I apologize if you were expecting something creepy to have happened by now, but what truly unsettled me as a child was how well everything seemed to have turned out. When Sharon reached the next part of her story, she got a crease in her forehead and a strange look in her eye. A week later, she received a phone call from the same man she had picked up. He didn't allow her to say much before he told her that she should thank God for her upbringing. He revealed that when he first got into the car, he had intended to rape and murder her. He planned to steal her car and dump her body in a ditch further down the road. However, after their kind conversation and her treating him to dinner, he couldn't bring himself to go through with it. He said he didn't think he could live with himself after harming such a nice person. His final words were a plea. "Please, Sharon, never ever pick up another hitchhiker." Then he hung up the phone. Sharon never heard from him again, and when she tried to call back, she only reached a payphone. From this story, I learned an important lesson. I will take that man's advice and never pick up a hitchhiker. I've learned one important lesson from my one and only experience picking up a hitchhiker. Don't do it. It was a Saturday night, probably around 1 in the morning, as I was driving down Route 542 in New Jersey, a road I frequently took to get into town. The stretch of road was lined with woods on either side, with the occasional house. I was on my way home when, as usual at that hour in our quiet old town, there wasn't a single other car on the road. I turned on the off-road lights on my Jeep to get better visibility on the dark highway, which allowed me to spot someone standing at the side of the road. As I got closer, I saw him raise his arm and stick out his thumb. He was trying to hitch a ride. My heart started racing. I had no idea if I should stop or not. I slowed down to get a better look at him. He appeared to be a younger man, maybe 28, wearing a light gray hoodie with the hood pulled up and blue denim jeans. The time to make a decision was pressing, and against my better judgment, I came to a stop. I rolled down the window and asked, "Where are you heading, friend?" "Just up the road," he replied in a deep, quiet tone. "Hop in," I called out. He opened the door to my Jeep and stepped inside. Jeep Wranglers have tight seals on the doors, so when he first tried to close it, it didn't shut properly. I politely said, "Oh, the door didn't shut. Just open it and slam it shut real hard. These doors can be difficult." His body language was unsettling. About 3 seconds after I finished speaking, he looked at me, then slowly turned his head to the right. He paused for another 3 or 4 seconds before finally opening the door and slamming it shut. Based on his movements, I already regretted my decision to let him in. I put my foot on the gas, and we started moving along the road. The speed limit was 55, but I accelerated to 75 to get him to his destination faster. "So how far did you say you're going?" I asked, trying to break the awkward silence. There was an uncomfortable pause before he replied, "Just a few miles up." I wanted to turn on the radio to fill the silence, but something in my gut told me not to. Suddenly, I noticed out of the corner of my eye that he had turned his head and was staring at me. I felt his gaze weighing on me like a brick, and I tried my best not to look back. Finally, he turned his head away and said, "You know, I've been wondering for a long time if it's worth it to end it all." I looked at him in confusion. He dug his hand into his pocket and continued, "I've been carrying this knife with me for the past few weeks, wondering when the right time would come." He pulled out a large red knife, and in that instant, I felt my stomach drop. "Put the knife away," I told him immediately. In a calm, emotionless voice, he said, "Pull over next to that sign." I did what he said and came to a stop next to a speed limit sign. What followed still haunts me. He began to slit his forearm next to 3 other scars from previous self-inflicted cuts and let out a disturbing moan. I managed to choke out the words, "You need to get out of my car right now, buddy." He looked at me again and said, "Get out of the car. I want to show you something." I told him no, and he raised the knife closer to me as an obvious threat. "Just get out for a second. There's something I want to show you behind that sign." I knew my life was on the line, and I had to be smart. "Yeah, okay, man. Let's go," I said. I opened the door to my Jeep, making a point to leave it open, raised my hands in the air, and backed away slowly from the door. He also exited the car and started walking over to my side. At the exact moment he was directly behind the car, I jumped back in, threw it into drive, and floored it down the road without looking back. I got home within 10 minutes, still breathing heavily and wanting to throw up. This was the scariest experience of my life, and I urge anyone who sees a hitchhiker on a deserted road at odd hours of the night to take no action other than to speed right past them. 3 months after I turned 16 in 2005, I got my first car, a 1999 Toyota Camry. One warm Saturday night, my friend Stan invited me to a party at the home of one of his friends. Knowing I wouldn't be in any condition to drive the Camry home afterward, we decided to carpool with Stan's girlfriend, Lisa. We lived in the countryside of Virginia, where big parties were rare. So when one did happen, it was a significant event, and everyone attended. The party was at a kid's house about 5 to 10 minutes away, and while I knew who he was, we weren't exactly friends. The drive to the party took us along a 2-lane highway, winding through the woods. There were a few houses scattered along the road, but for the most part, it was just a long stretch of empty highway. The host's house was small, typical of the area, but since his nearest neighbors were relatively far away, the party was held outside without concern for noise. I'll skip ahead to the moment when Lisa, our designated driver, had to leave unexpectedly for a family emergency. Stan assured me it was fine and that we would find another way home. Fast forward a few hours and a few drinks later, I could barely walk straight. It was around 2 a.m. and I decided it was time to go. I started looking for Stan, but I couldn't find him anywhere. It seemed like everyone I knew had already left. Frustrated and disoriented, I asked the party host if I could use his phone to call Stan's home. After 2 unsuccessful attempts, I realized I shouldn't wake his family. With no other options, I stepped outside and began walking home. I knew the walk would take me anywhere from half an hour to an hour, given my condition. About 15 minutes into my walk, I noticed headlights approaching from behind. Filled with hope, I lifted my arm and stuck out my thumb. As the car slowed and came to a stop next to me, the driver, a man in a 1998 Ford Explorer, rolled down the window and asked where I was headed. I told him my house was just down the road, probably slurring my words beyond comprehension. He chuckled and told me to hop in. Gratefully, I climbed into the truck, too exhausted to engage in conversation. I remember zoning out as the man asked me questions, and before I knew it, I had passed out. When I woke up, I was still in the moving truck. The driver glanced at me but didn't say a word. As I looked around, I realized the road was unfamiliar. Nervously, I asked, where are we going?" Instead of answering, the man deflected my question with another one. What were you doing out this late anyway? The sobering reality of the situation hit me hard. You can let me out anywhere, I told him. His firm no made me feel sick. I genuinely thought I was going to throw up. As nausea overcame me, I started to gag. The driver turned to look at me, and I seized the moment to create a distraction. I leaned toward him, continuing to gag, and he began to slow down the car. Thankful for the alcohol I had consumed, I finally threw up, intentionally covering the man's lap. He yelled in frustration and stopped the car. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted into the woods and ducked behind some bushes. The man followed me into the woods with a flashlight, shining it over me twice without noticing. Eventually, I heard his footsteps receding deeper into the woods. That's when I made my move back to his truck, but he had locked it. Miraculously, I spotted another car approaching in the distance. I ran into the middle of the street, waving my arms like a lunatic. The driver tried to avoid me, but I wouldn't let them pass. They had no choice but to stop. I yelled for help, explaining that I had been kidnapped by the man in the Ford Explorer. The driver agreed to give me a lift, not to the police station but back to my house. I made it home safely and couldn't thank the driver enough. I immediately woke up my parents and recounted the ordeal. My dad wanted to know if I got the man's license plate number, and I felt like punching myself for not doing so. I had failed to gather the simplest information that would have allowed me to report him properly. All I could remember was that he drove a faded blue 1999 Ford Explorer. I made sure to confront Stan about abandoning me at the party. Ever since, I've held a grudge against him for leaving without telling me. I haven't seen him in 4 years, and this is the first time I've thought about that incident in almost a year. As time goes on, even the worst memories may fade, but writing this has brought it all back to the forefront of my mind.